Hey everybody, Stephen Totillo from GameFile with the story behind one of the stories that I recently ran through GameFile. This was a scoop that I ran on Wednesday, July 15th, about one of the studio heads at one of Xbox's game studios being amongst the people whose jobs were cut as part of the big 1,600 people now, 1,600 people later, massive cuts happening at the Xbox gaming division. Somehow, even though those cuts had been reported overall back on July 6th, on Monday, July 6th, it took 9 days for it to come out that amongst those cuts was the head of one of Microsoft Studios. How did it not get known? How did it not get discovered all that time? How did I find that out? How was I able to bring that to GameFile readers and report that to the public? That's what I want to talk to you about here. I can't tell the story behind every story that I report at GameFile or that I've reported over the years for Kotaku, for Axios, for MTV News. Sometimes those stories are boring. Sometimes it's just somebody offered me an interview or I booked an interview with somebody and they said something. Sometimes it's stories that are secret and I can't talk about how I got this tip or who these off-the-record anonymous sources are. But sometimes I think there's enough of a backstory that it can be interesting. Thankfully, I've had a lot of editorial freedom in my career. I'm able to include a lot of context in what I write. Certainly GameFile, it's my own, independent publication / newsletter, and I can write whatever I want to write. But at some point, you want to just tell the reader the news or what's happening, and you don't have room, or you don't think they may have the patience or the interest to read about all the behind the scenes that led to it. And I've sometimes thought, well, what if I had a podcast? What if I made a video about the behind the scenes of some of these articles? So that's what I'm going to do here. Let me know what you think of this process. I'm going to be talking a bit about the reporting that I did, the decisions I made in the process of reporting it, just kind of how this piece came together. But I'll also be talking to you about my life as an independent journalist and being a parent. I'm a stay-at-home, work-from-home parent. My wife commutes to New York City, and so we're just outside of the city. We have 9-year-old twins, and so it works much better for my schedule than for hers, for me to be the person responsible for a lot of the pick the kids up from school, take them to extracurriculars and what have you. And you'll hear in this accounting of how this piece came together, how that kind of meshes, collides, plays nicely or not so nicely, the parenting and the work and how, sort of I navigate the two things. Also, I have for you in the telling of this, possibly the greatest laundromat experience I've ever had of my life, which occurred in the midst of all of this. So I'm going to explain this scoop. This article ran again on July 15th in the evening, at least on the East Coast, it was the evening. The headline was ZeniMax Online Studios leadership to exit as part of Xbox cuts. Specifically, this was a story that scooped that Joe Burba, who'd been at the studio for 14 years and had just a year ago been named the head of ZeniMax Online Studios, makers of Elder Scrolls Online, was exiting along with 3 other senior leaders of the studio. To explain how I got the story, I need to give a little bit of context. Don't want to go too far into the backstory because you came here hopefully to hear about this story, not many stories before this. But when companies are doing layoffs, they are obligated, at least in the United States, to send a warn letter or a warn notification to state officials. And it will tell them about the scale of the layoff, and the notice that they send will often also provide specifics about the roles impacted by the cut. And so when these cuts occurred, which was back on Monday, July 6th, 2 Mondays ago from when I'm recording this, we got some insight into where these impacts, where the job cuts might be happening, but not a lot of specifics. Asha Sharma, the newish CEO of Xbox, had said in a memo to the team, the gaming team, and then this memo was also published publicly, that there were significant cuts being made on the Xbox platform team, that there were going to be studios that were being divested of, sold back to management or to new buyers, and that there would be, and there was some acknowledgement that there would be cuts across the board at game studios. So I knew as a starting point, okay, that because there's cuts to the Xbox platform team, there'll be cuts in Washington State, which is where Microsoft is headquartered. And sure enough, when I checked the, what is it called? I got it in front of me, the Employment Security Department website for Washington State, and I looked at their list of WARN notifications. These are, by the way, Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification. WARN is an acronym. I saw, lo and behold, that on July 6th, Microsoft had informed the state that it was cutting 605 jobs in a layoff. People would be, their layoff would begin on September 4th. And Washington State publishes the letters that employers send to state officials. So I could look into that letter and I could see the job roles impacted. Again, not all Xbox related people, as opposed to some previous letters that I've reported on. They redacted the addresses, so I wasn't able to zero in on okay, this might have been this team because they're in this building or what have you. But I got some of that sort of sense of the scale of it, or at least that, okay, some subset of 605 are Xbox, probably a lot of the Xbox platform cuts that Sharma was talking about. Now, when I think about kind of reporting on layoffs, these are, people's lives are being upended. I'm sensitive to that. I was laid off from my previous job, Axios, where I was covering games for 2.5 years. And then, the company was going in a different direction, and they were getting out of the business of certain newsletters, including the gaming newsletter. They gave me tons of notice, but still, it sucked. Like, it sucked. You're questioning what your future is going to bring you, and your life is just turned upside down. It can be challenging in terms of family and just sort of the opportunities ahead, and it's just, it sucks. So, in thinking about the sort of goals of reporting out layoffs, it's not to just, name people, oh, this person lost their job, this person lost their job. But I think it's to help people wrap their head around, in the case of a mass layoff, what the large number even means. How big was this cut? Okay, how do we make that number, as a reporter, how do I make that number not just a statistic? How do I make you feel the reality of what that felt like for people, to give you a truth related to this layoff, to help you to understand and comprehend kind of what's going on here, at scale, with some specificity as well. What kind of choices were being made about which departments were being cut? What does that tell us about the people making these decisions and their values and the previous business approaches, the new business approach, so on and so forth. So again, I knew there were a lot of game studios all around the country that were potentially impacted. So I reached out to the labor departments in various states. I reached out to California because of all the Microsoft-owned studios in California, a lot of the Activision studios making Call of Duty games, Obsidian, makers of role-playing games. California got back to me. Initially, they said, we don't have anything. We don't have any warn notices. And then they came back about a half an hour later to say, no, actually, we have one from Obsidian. And I was able to therefore report on Wednesday, July 8th, that unfortunately 52 people from Obsidian were losing their jobs. And that was somewhat consistent with reporting that Jason Schreier had done at Bloomberg, reporting about how a number of projects were being canceled at Obsidian. They were being focused onto a Fallout game. Today, the day I'm recording this, July 17th, Microsoft has confirmed Schreier's reporting, not that there was, I think, any doubt, that in fact Obsidian is making a Fallout game. I had reached out to state officials in Texas. They got back to me very quickly to confirm that 158 ZeniMax workers were laid off in Texas. Some people have reported that all as id Software. It's not, a large part of that is id Software, but even in the location where id is based in Richardson, Texas, my understanding is that there are some other Bethesda offices there or teams there. And so some subset of that, I think a large portion of that 158 in Texas was id. Okay, so then Maryland. Maryland didn't post anything. They didn't get back to me that quickly compared to Texas and California. And so that was a little more of a mystery. I think it was Thursday of last week, so maybe July 9th, they'd gotten back to me and they had said they had not gotten back to me. They'd posted 2 large cuts, one for ZeniMax Online Studios, which is the makers of The Elder Scrolls Online, and then one for ZeniMax Media Inc., which is Bethesda Game Studios, the people who make Fallout and Elder Scrolls, as well as Bethesda Publishing. And so there was a number for that. And so the total was 379 ZeniMax employees in Maryland. And amongst that, if I check my reporting there, it was July 9th is when I reported it. It may have been late in the previous day where they had posted this. But of those 379 jobs, 213 of the jobs cut were ZeniMax Online Studios workers in some shape or form. So Maryland had still not specified anything. They'd not posted a letter that ZeniMax or Microsoft would have sent. And so I followed up with Maryland and I said, can you send me the documentation here that would have gone along with this cut? And they said, well, we need up to 30 days to do this. So, Texas sent me stuff right away. California, I think it was the same day. Maryland, we might need 30 days. Okay. So I kind of put that in the back of my mind, and I was focusing on other reporting and plenty of other stories to work on. And fast forward to Wednesday of this week, July 15th, and I was working on a newsletter about something completely unrelated. And I was also thinking, going back to talking about being a parent and everything like that, that I had a kind of a complicated, parenting schedule for that day. So my kids were at summer camp, but it was a really hot day. And sometimes on really hot days, the camp says we can't do a full day of camp because it was an outdoors related camp. We don't want the kids to melt. So I knew that I needed to pick my kids up by 2 p.m. I had to drive out by 2 p.m. to get my kids. Also, unusually that day, my daughter had a friend's pool party to go to, birthday party, at 4:30 p.m. So I knew I'm going to be going into parent mode for the camp pickup. I'm going to be back in parent mode for the taking her to the birthday party. Oh, wait, we didn't get a gift yet, so I got to take my daughter to somewhere in town to get a gift. So we talked about, my daughter's like, let's get her something at the bookstore. So, okay, so I have to kind of bake that into the schedule. And so this is what I'm thinking. I'm not stressed about having to file anything on deadline this day. I could work on stuff that I could publish, the day after. The story I had, I thought would be interesting, but wasn't super time sensitive. Well, looking back, as I'm driving, or I guess as I'm picking my kids up at 2 p.m. at camp, it's at 2:04 p.m., according to the timestamp in my inbox, that Maryland got back to me. And Maryland got back to me, and they said, we have the letter of that breaks down the layoffs. We have the whole WARN notification. Great. Okay. So I don't remember exactly when I saw that, but I had something else on my mind as well, which was that I knew that the next day, which was Thursday, which is yesterday, I would be going into New York City for an interesting interview opportunity related to games tied to an event. I'm not talking specifically about what it is because I haven't run the coverage of it yet. And it was business attire was required, which meant I had to wear a suit. And so a kind of a subplot of the day was that I got in my head, I want to wear my blue suit. And then where's my blue suit? And I couldn't find my blue suit. I could find my gray suit, my black suit. I couldn't find my blue suit. I don't wear suits a lot, but I was like, oh, it might be nice to wear the blue suit. Couldn't find it. I stopped by a laundromat on the way to camp. We don't have any clothes for you. They can punch in your phone number and check. Because they're like, we don't have anything here for you. When I got home from picking up my kids at camp, I texted my wife. I'm like, I can't find my blue suit. Any thoughts on it? And she said, have you looked here? Yes. Did you call this other dry cleaner that you sometimes like to go to? And I'm like, I haven't been there in a while, but I'll call them. I called them, and the person there is like, no, we don't. What's your number? No, we don't have anything here for you either. So, okay, my suit's lost. That's kind of a bummer. Pardon me. So what do I do about that? I don't know. I guess I was going to wear the black suit or the gray suit. I'm thinking, okay, so we're back from camp. By the way, I called that dry cleaner at 2:32 p.m., the second dry cleaner, and I struck out with that dry cleaner. The letter, again, had come in at 2:04 p.m. I don't know exactly when I looked at the letter, but I must have looked at it by 2:41, because that's when, according to my phone logs, is when I texted Microsoft, and I said, hey, I found something here telling me that you cut a studio head. So specifically, and you can see this in the article that I ran on the 15th, you can see the list of job roles that I was looking at that really took me aback. What happened was I was looking through the Maryland letter, thinking that there probably wasn't going to be any big news in there because we'd already known, obviously, about the big Microsoft cuts overall. We already knew this pretty large headcount cut of 379 people impacting the ZeniMax family of workers from the various teams and studios in Maryland. So what more was there to find out? But I figured I might as well look. The jobs are listed alphabetically. And I get to the last page. The very last job impacted is zone lead because it begins with a Z. So that's the very last job listed. But you can see this in the article that the first job on the final page, because again, it's alphabetical, is Software Engineering Manager 2. One person with that role who was impacted. Next, it's Staff Software Engineer. 2 people with that role impacted. And then Studio Art Manager. That sounded kind of senior. It said 1. Studio Audio Director. Studio Game Director. There was 1 each of these. And then, this was the kicker, the jaw dropper. Studio Head. 1. I'm like, wait a minute, studio head? How is there a studio head being cut? Now remember, this was a notification for job cuts by ZeniMax, by Microsoft, but through in the ZeniMax portion of the gaming team in Maryland. And so I thought, okay, this is either the studio head of Bethesda Game Studios, which seemed highly implausible. I thought, well, we would have heard that if that had happened. But I also thought we would have heard it if it was ZeniMax Online Studios as well, right? Because we're hearing by this point from a lot of the workers who were affected. Their union was speaking out. So surely, could it be them? But would we not have known that? Or maybe they had some small team. Maybe they had some Skunkworks team, and technically that was a studio, and that was the studio head that was cut. I wasn't sure. And so I reach out to Microsoft. I'm also thinking, what sources do I have who can tell me this? And so I reach out to Microsoft at 2:41 for comment. So there's some, you reach out to PR and you hope that they're going to give you some information. A little after 3 o'clock, I heard back from somebody there who was saying, well, we can get you some specifics, but we got to sort of figure out what we can share and all that. And so I think on the company end, when you reach out to companies, they have their sense of like they either have a statement ready or they have information or they have some other reason why they're not ready to confirm it. And so you as a reporter can still be trying to report something out. And I was thinking about that, but I was also thinking I got to get my daughter this pool party. We got to get a gift. So I have a bunch of things going on at once. So I'm like, well, when can you tell me? And they're like, well, when were you going to publish? And I'm like, well, maybe today, but it can wait till tomorrow, but I don't know. And I'm thinking, another reporter could have gotten this letter. I don't know. But pretty soon I'm in time to get the gift mode and all that kind of thing. As I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. And as I'm knowing that even if Microsoft doesn't get back to me, there is a story in that we now have confirmation via this letter that a studio head and a studio game director and a lot of other senior sounding titles, elsewhere in this document, a VP of global sales and business development, a vice president controller, like some pretty senior people were impacted by these cuts, as well as like over 60 game testers. Like that was like a large number to see. And so I'm like, there's a story here, even if they don't get back to me, even if I don't get this information. And so it's a bit of managing, okay, what is the right amount of information that I have for the best possible story that I can get in terms of informing GameFile readers and the public. And I'm weighing when to run a story versus what information I can have at that given time. But I'm also thinking, like, technically speaking, I'm not like, I can't just run the story whenever. I got to get my daughter to the party. So soon I'm in dad mode, get the kids to the party mode, get the gift and all that. While we're doing that, and the goal is to be at the party by 4:30, but we're running late, we get the gift. I should say that by that point, right before I was about to go take my daughter to get the gift, I noticed that another reporter, a guy named Chris Kerr, who covers gaming, the business of games over at Game Developer, credit to him, he'd gotten the list. He'd gotten the document as well, and he'd published it to Blue Sky. But he did not call out the studio head thing. And so I go back to Xbox PR, and I'm like, look, it's out there. I don't see a story yet anywhere. I don't see anybody focusing in on the studio head aspect of this. But I can't justify sitting on this for a long period of time now. I was transparent with him. I'm like, I got a family thing to do. I got to take my daughter to a party. But like, it's out there now. Can you tell me any more? But otherwise, I feel like I'm going to have to run the story. So they're like, well, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. So I take my daughter to the party. We're running a bit late, and I'm getting a call. The phone's plugged in. I can do the the hands-free call or whatever. I don't recognize the number. I answer the number. It's the cleaners, the second dry cleaner that I called. She's like, I have your suit. I'm like, wait, what? She's like, I didn't think I had your suit. But then I remembered. She's like, I thought you were never coming back. I put it downstairs where I put the clothes up for people that I assume are never coming back. And I'm like, oh my God, you have my suit. I'm like, when did I drop the suit off? She's like, let me check. 2 years ago, she says. I'd forgotten 2 years earlier that I dropped the suit off. So I'm like, oh, I got to get my suit. This is great. I got my blue suit for the event. So I was very excited about that. I'm also like, okay, drop my daughter off at the pool party. She's there. I'm like, okay, do I go back right away? Like, how soon am I going to have to pull the trigger on publishing the story? Do I have time to get my suit? I'm like, well, the laundromat's on the way. So I stop by the laundromat. I get my suit. I reclaim it after 2 years. I asked the dry cleaner if I owe her rent for my suit living in her dry cleaner for 2 years. She laughs. She says, no. So that's good. And I'm able to pick up the suit. And I head home ready to write up the rest of the context around the layoffs and the cuts and everything. I still don't know which studio head it is. Other sources aren't able to help me with this. And the Microsoft perspective on this is, if we could, we would like to tell our studio about this cut. We would like them to be notified. So how about we give you the specifics if you agree to wait until we notify the team? And I'm like, well, what are we talking about? Like, are we talking about days? Are we talking about hours? And it's like, hours. I'm like, okay, that's reasonable, because frankly, I gotta make my son dinner right now anyway. My daughter's gonna be eating at the pool party, but my son, he couldn't go to the pool party, so he's gonna be eating. And so I am cooking dinner. I am keeping an eye on my phone and my computer. The draft is ready to go. It's fully written to be generic, like a studio head in Maryland, could be this, could be this. And I'm like, I don't like having to be either or, but there's again a lot of other information. 60 game testers were amongst the cuts. It's a studio game, game director, and all these other things that I think are still worth including. And then I'm thinking, okay, wait, I got to get my daughter from the party. It starts a thunderstorm outside, so I'm in a panic about that as well. Like, oh my God, is the party going to be canceled? Thankfully, the parent of another one of the girls at the pool party, I texted them. I'm like, look, I'm a reporter, and I might have a breaking news story here. Is there any chance that you could bring my daughter back? We're kind of neighbors already anyway, so I didn't think it would be that hard for them if they were cool with it. Thankfully, they said yes, so I owe them one for that. I'm like, otherwise I'm gonna have to like pull over probably while I'm driving my daughter home to file the story, which I can do. But I just need to know. And they were like, no, we got it. Don't worry. So that was very helpful. Thank you. Carpooling is an essential parent tool in the effort to be good parents. And so then it was finally at 7:40 p.m. that I heard from Microsoft that the leaders at ZeniMax Online Studios had just notified their team. You can run your story now. They'd given me the specifics by that point, again, under this agreement that I would wait so that the team could find out directly, which I just thought was like the right thing to do. Well, again, it wasn't a major amount of time that I was going to be like sitting on this. And like, I think it was newsworthy, and it's worth the public knowing that this particular studio head was amongst the departures. It tells you a little bit of, hints, I guess, about some aspect of kind of decisions being made around the studio for 4 of the senior leaders to be gone, for 2 other people who were already working in the studio to be moved up. I doesn't tell you the whole story, but I think it was important extra information for the public to understand, and I was fine with the idea that the studio would be notified first. Again, there was going to be a story on GameFile anyway about just a studio head, so I was able to sort of manage the situation to know the specifics. And I think that wound up being maybe the best for all parties involved. I was able to publish a piece within minutes. Like, I had the draft ready, and so I just hit publish, send, whatever the button is called, and the story was out there. And so, story was published. The scoop happened. The team got to find out about this from their own leaders before they read it in the press, as long as they were looking at their emails. I was able to recover my blue suit after 2 years. Did I mention my son was fed dinner? My daughter had a good time at the party. Everything worked out. Everything worked out pretty well, I think. The thunderstorm was severe, but not so severe. The pool aspect of the pool party got rained out, but they had a second surprise extra, like a second day follow-up party, makeup party, to do where they went to the pool and they were able to swim a bit. So it seemed to work out for everybody. That is the story behind the story of ZeniMax Online Studios leadership to exit as part of Xbox cuts. Hopefully you found that interesting. If you want to get more of these when I run stories that have good backstories behind them, let me know. And if it's a story I can tell, I'll tell you. For now, take care.